Hello, Richard from budgetguitarist.com here with a very important announcement.
Geez. 10 seconds in, and we're already off the rails. Ah.
Welcome, Richard from budgetguitarist.com here today with 10 tips on how to make your Epiphone Les Paul much more betterer, more gooder, more good better, more better, better, a lot better, better. Tip number 1, pickup swap. Most Epiphone guitars come with ProBucker pickups. I'm not a fan. So the best thing that you can do to make your Epiphone Les Paul sound much mo better is to swap out this pickup. I have 2 examples for you today. I have this Epiphone Les Paul with a Gibson Dirty Fingers pickup in the bridge. And I also have this Epiphone Les Paul, which has a DiMarzio Super Distortion pickup in the bridge. The DiMarzio Super Distortion was perhaps used by Eddie Van Halen, definitely used by Ace Frehley, and in general, definitely used by the Scorpions. And it's a really good rock pickup. Much higher output. In both cases, we're talking about ceramic pickups. Tip number 2, the nut. Epiphone Les Pauls ship with Graphtec nuts these days. That wasn't always the case. So if you have a modern Epiphone Les Paul, I would recommend you don't touch it. Don't touch the nut. But if you have an older Epiphone Les Paul and you suspect that the nut is made out of plastic, you can replace it with a Graphtec nut. If you're not sure how to do that, take it to your local Sam Ash Guitar Center, whoever your local guitar repair person is, and they can do it for you. When you replace a nut on a guitar, you're really, in my opinion, not affecting any of the notes on the fretboard except for the 6 open strings. But when you consider that you play those 6 open strings quite a bit, I think it's a mod worth doing. Number 3, frets. One of the things about the Epiphone Les Paul that a lot of people have noticed is that the frets do tend to wear a little sooner than one would like. I think this is probably because they use less expensive fret material, fret wire. But the nice thing about Epiphone Les Pauls is that they don't glue in the frets. And so if you have to remove the frets and replace them, it's actually extremely easy to do. Now again, if you've never refretted a guitar before, this is not the time to start. I do not recommend that you practice on something like an Epiphone Les Paul. You can usually go to a local mom and pop store or sometimes garage sales. Guitar conventions are really good, and you can pick up junker necks that nobody cares about. Worst case scenario, you can go to Guitar Fetish, which is GFS. And you can buy $20, $30, $40 necks, and those would be good to practice on. Tip number 4, bridge slash tailpiece. Bridge, tailpiece. In some cases, you might discover, especially if you've bought a used Epiphone Les Paul and it's been around for a while, you might discover that the slots on your guitar have started to wear down. Now, the problem with that is that you'll start breaking strings. It is possible to replace an individual saddle, but for the money, you might be better off just replacing the whole assembly. Now, should you spend really huge amount of money on this type of thing? No, not necessarily, but don't buy the first $10 piece of junk that you find on Amazon. This is a good part of your guitar sustain, so don't skimp on it. Buy something good. 5, pots. So the pots on Epiphone Les Pauls, again, the modern ones are pretty good. But it wouldn't be a bad idea. Flip the guitar around, take off the back cover and have a look at the pots. If they're the size of dimes, then they're as cheap as can be, and at some point in time they're going to fail and you should probably swap them out. One really good tip, if you want to swap out electronics for Epiphone Les Paul, you can buy the entire pre-wired kit from StewMac or from GFS. That'll save you a lot of time. Caps, capacitors. I really like the orange drop capacitors. I really do. I think they make a really big difference. Usually the caps that come in Epiphone Les Paul are not very good. I've read that the 2020 Epiphone Les Pauls are supposed to come with orange drop caps. But the fact of the matter is you can go to stewmac.com and buy orange drop caps for a couple of bucks. It's an easy mod. It's definitely well worth doing. 7, output jack. This is a really good one. On this guitar, which is a 2004 Epiphone Les Paul, this originally had a plastic output jack. Very similar to this one. Okay? Now the problem with these is, as you're putting the screws back in, if you over tighten the screw a little bit, it will crack, and then you have to replace it. When you do have to replace it, the smart move is to do what Gibson does and use metal, not plastic. So here's my Gibson Les Paul tribute, 70s tribute. This is how it comes stock. This is a really good idea. If you gig a lot, you might even want to take some initiative and just replace it now. Really good tip. 8, tuners. Epiphone Les Pauls come with Grover tuners. The thing is, not all Grover tuners are created equal. I've found some of them to be kind of junky and some of them to be pretty good. So when you have an Epiphone Les Paul, it's kind of up to you to decide. What makes a tuner good? The ratio. If you have to turn quite a bit to adjust the pitch of a string, that's actually a good thing because it allows you to fine tune. On some of the cheaper Grover tuners, you'll find that you're constantly overshooting or undershooting the pitch, and that's really frustrating. So it's really up to you to determine. Now, locking tuners are pretty cool. Locking tuners will enable you to basically just put the string through once, lock it, and turn it. They're super fast. They're a little on the pricey side, so you might spend $50 to $80 on locking tuners, depending on where you get them. That's a mod you might want to think about. It just depends. I like them, but they're not really going to impact your tone that much, so your mileage may vary. One really cool tip, if you haven't noticed before, on Grover tuners, there's a little screw right here. You can adjust how easy or how hard it is to turn the tuner based on how tight or loose that screw is. Tip 9, removing the finish from the back of the neck. Well, Epiphone guitars come with a thick poly finish on the back, just like this. And it's not necessarily anything wrong with that, but I decided with this Les Paul that I was going to remove the finish. It came out looking like this. It's kind of nice. I used tongue oil to finish it after I sanded off all the poly. So you can do this if you want to. It definitely changes the feel. I do like the feel of this neck a lot better. It feels a lot faster to me. It's not like sticky like the poly can get. It is a lot of work. It's kind of a pain in the butt. It's up to you to decide whether you want to do it or not. If you do want to do it, sanding belt or some really, really good files, like just make sure that once you've got all the finish off that you work your way up through the sandpapers. You know, you start at 80 and go all the way up to whatever, 2000. That's what I did. Then finish it with some tongue oil. And finally, tip 10, round the neck binding edges. So the edge of the fretboard here, where there's plastic, I recommend that you kind of round that with a little bit of sandpaper. So you get like a little piece of sandpaper, kind of work it back and forth while the strings are off. Tape down the fretboard first. And if you round this off, it'll give it a more comfortable, sort of like played for a long time feeling. It's really annoying when there's a harsh, hard plastic edge at the edge of the fretboard. That's not comfortable to play, but you can round that over. A lot of big ticket guitar manufacturers do that. It's one of the ways they distinguish themselves from the cheapies. And I've never understood it because it's super easy to round the edges of your fretboard. And yet so many inexpensive guitars don't do it. I'll give you an 11th tip, and this one's super easy. Change your strings. We tend to, as budget guitar players, we tend to leave our strings on for way, way, way too long. And you might say, well, you know, I don't play my guitar that much, so what difference does it make? Actually, the elements themselves, even if it's not your greasy, grubby fingers all over the metal, just being out in the open air, just hanging out in your music room, in your bedroom, in your den, in your basement, whatever. Moisture in the air will eventually start to gunk up the strings, and they'll start to get dead, and they won't sound as zingy. They won't sound as zingy. And what will eventually happen is they'll actually play a little bit flat. Like it will actually impact the intonation very slightly. So change your strings. What is it, $5-6? So those are the tips I have for you. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, please subscribe, please click the little bell thingy, and we will be back next week with another video. Again, thank you very much for watching.